Colorado Territory, June 1876. The sun was crawling toward the western peaks when Victor Faulkner spotted movement in the low valley below. Something wrong, something that cut against the land's usual stillness. He reined in his horse, squinting through the dust. It was a woman, tied to a post. Her arms above her head, wrists raw, her dark dress ripped at the hem. And around her half a dozen rifles leaned against rocks and tree stumps. Apache campfires burned low and shadows moved beyond the cottonwoods. Victor's chest tightened. He had not come here to save anyone. He had come for revenge. His younger brother, Levi, had been found 2 days earlier with an arrow through his side, stripped of his gear, face turned to the sky. Folks back in Trinidad said it was Apache. Victor had ridden out the next morning with a loaded rifle and a fire behind his ribs. But now this girl, she could not have been more than 22. Her hair hung in tangled ropes down her back, her lips cracked from wind and sun. She was not Apache. Her skin was pale beneath the dust, and her eyes, he saw them even from across the clearing, were red from crying. And still she stood proud. Even tied to a post in enemy territory, Victor slid off his horse, keeping to the boulders. He circled wide, quiet as he could, boots barely brushing the ground. Twilight was closing in, and the Apaches were distracted, speaking low near their fire. He moved behind the post. When he reached her, she startled, her body jerking. "Shh," he raised both hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." Her eyes searched his face. "Are you real?" Her voice cracked. "Or am I dying?" He pulled his knife from his belt and started sawing at the ropes. "You're not dying," he said. "Not today." Tears spilled down her face. She tried to speak again, but her knees buckled. He caught her just before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he murmured. He carried her to the trees, slow and careful. She was too light skin on bone. She had not eaten in days. Once they were far enough, he settled her against a fallen log, wrapping his coat around her. "My name's Victor Faulkner," he said. "I came looking for someone else. Then I saw you." She blinked up at him, still half in shock. "Catherine." "Catherine Sutton." Victor gave a slow nod. "What happened, Catherine?" "I was with a wagon train," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We were headed for Fort Garland. My father, he died of fever 2 weeks ago. It was just me and my sister Caroline after that. Then the Apache came. They thought we were trespassing. They killed most of the men, took me. I do not know what happened to Caroline." Victor swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." She met his eyes. "Why did you help me?" Victor looked away, jaw tight. "Because I saw your tears. And I could not stomach walking past." She was quiet for a moment, then she whispered, "Thank you." Victor stood and scanned the trees. They needed to move. He crouched beside her again. "Can you ride?" She nodded. "I think so." He helped her up, careful of her wrists, guiding her to the horse. She winced as she mounted, but she did not complain. They rode south through the night, both silent, the moon painting silver across the hills. Victor kept his rifle across his lap, eyes sweeping the land. By dawn, they reached a shallow canyon with a stream and some cover. He helped her down and built a small fire under the overhang. She drank from his canteen like she had never tasted water before. Afterward, she leaned back against the rock wall, watching him through tired eyes. "You saved me," she said. "You risked your life." Victor sat down across from her, rubbing his jaw. "I did." "Why?" He looked at her, steady and open. "Because I have killed before. I came out here ready to do it again. But when I saw you tied up and crying, I knew if I shed more blood, it would not bring my brother back. It would just make me something I could not live with." She stared at him, her throat working. "You lost your brother," he nodded. "Levi, younger than me. Good heart. He was out here trying to trade with the tribes. Someone shot him. I do not know if it was the same band that took you, but I was ready to make them all pay." Catherine's voice was soft. "But you chose to save me instead." "I did." She reached out slowly, hesitantly, and laid her fingers over his hand. Victor stilled. "You did the right thing," she whispered. He turned his hand over, wrapping his fingers around hers. "I hope so." They sat like that for a while, the fire crackling low, the wind shifting through the canyon. Later, he gave her jerky and tore part of his shirt to make bandages for her wrists. Catherine winced as he wrapped them, but she did not look away. "You have kind hands," she said. Victor looked up, meeting her eyes. "I am not always a kind man. You were kind to me." A long silence passed between them, then she said, "You could have left me there." "You could have kept riding." "I could have," he agreed, "but you stayed," he nodded. "I did." Her voice was quiet but sure. "I am glad you did." Victor leaned back, watching her. She had dirt on her face, blood on her dress, and still something in her made his chest ache. A strength that had not broken, even when everything else had. He had come out here looking for justice, or vengeance, or maybe just a way to feel something again after Levy. What he found instead was a girl with fire in her eyes and bruises on her arms, who looked at him like he was more than loss and rage. And for the first time in months, Victor felt like maybe he could be. By the time the sun dipped again, Catherine was asleep beside the fire, curled in his coat, her breathing soft and even. Victor sat with his rifle across his lap, watching the stars blink to life overhead. He had come for blood, but he found her. The next morning, Victor kept the fire low and broke camp without waking Catherine. She stirred when he handed her a strip of cornbread from his saddlebag, her fingers still stiff but steadier than the night before. The bruising on her wrists had deepened, the skin mottled like storm clouds. She didn't complain, only nodded once and ate without a word. They rode east, keeping low through the gulches, following dry creek beds and deer trails. Victor kept his rifle in easy reach and scanned for fresh sign, broken brush, ash, tracks, but the land was quiet. The Apache band had moved on, or maybe they'd never stayed in one place long. Either way, he didn't trust silence in country like this. By midday, the heat pressed down heavy, and Catherine's skin had gone pale again beneath the dust. He found a stand of cottonwoods near a spring and helped her down, guiding her toward shade. "You're still burning," he said, pressing the back of his hand to her cheek. "You might have caught something out there." She looked toward the water, her voice faint. "I've had fevers before. I usually come through." Victor dipped his kerchief in the spring and laid it across her neck. "Still, we'll rest here for a bit." Catherine settled onto the grass, legs folded beneath her, her fingers picked at a loose thread near her knee. "Was your brother younger by much?" Victor leaned against a tree, arms crossed, watching her. 4 years. He was always the one who could talk folks down. I handled the cattle, he handled the rest. Couldn't stand blood, wouldn't carry a gun unless I made him." Catherine's hand fell still. "Then he must have been brave, coming out here alone." Victor stared toward the distant hills. He thought if he came honest, with gifts and open hands, he could build something new, said the old ways weren't working, not for anyone. Catherine looked up at him. Maybe he was right. Victor's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter now." "It does," she said. "It matters that someone tried." They sat quiet for a while, the breeze stirring the leaves overhead. A hawk circled high, its shadow sweeping across the grass like a passing thought. When Catherine spoke again, her voice was steady. "I wasn't meant for the trail," she said. "I taught sewing at a ladies' school in St. Louis. I only came west because my father wanted a new start after Mama died." Victor knelt beside the spring and splashed water on his face. "You didn't want to come," she shook her head. "I wanted to stay where things made sense, but Caroline, she was always chasing some horizon. She said she'd never marry a man who didn't have dirt on his boots." Victor looked over. "She older or younger?" "Twin," Catherine said, eyes distant. "But you'd never know it. She always led, I just tried to keep up." Victor considered that. "You're still here, that counts for something." Catherine pressed the wet cloth to her forehead. "If she's alive, I have to find her. I can't go back to anything without knowing." Victor nodded. "We'll look." She glanced at him, surprised. "You've already done more than anyone had a right to ask." He met her gaze. "Doesn't sit right leaving someone behind." The spring babbled soft between them. A pair of blue jays chased each other through the branches. Catherine leaned back against the tree and pulled her knees to her chest. "You don't talk like most men I've known." Victor arched a brow. "How's that?" "You listen," she said. "You don't fill the silence just to push it away." He looked down, brushing dirt from his knee. "Some things don't need fixing with words." She smiled faintly. That's what I mean. Victor stood and offered his hand. Come on, if we ride steady we can reach the old stage station before dusk. Might be someone there who's seen your sister. She took his hand and let him pull her up. And if no one has? Then we keep riding, he said. Together. Her fingers lingered in his for a moment before she let go. They headed east again, the sun falling behind them, throwing long shadows that stretched across the scrub. Catherine rode straighter in the saddle now, her gaze sharper. She didn't speak much, but when she did, Victor listened like the words mattered. Because they did. And somewhere between the silence and the road ahead, something had shifted, something quiet and certain, like the first breath after a storm. The old stage station stood gray and leaning against the wind, half swallowed by prairie grass and time. Its windows had long since blown out and the roof sagged toward the west, but the stone walls still held. Victor rode ahead, reins loose, and Catherine followed a few paces behind, her eyes tracking the horizon. A lone mule was picketed near the well, its ribs showing under Apache hide. That was enough to put Victor on edge. He dismounted without a word, rifle in hand, and motioned for Catherine to stay back. Someone's here, he said low, her lips parted, but she didn't speak. She slipped off the horse and crouched behind the water trough, watching. Victor stepped up to the doorway, boots crunching over broken glass and grit. Inside, the air hung heavy with old smoke and something sour. 2 bedrolls lay near the hearth. A pair of boots stuck out from behind the stove, motionless. He moved quiet, rifle raised. "Don't shoot," came a rasping voice. "Ain't no fight left in me." A man sat propped against the wall, one leg wrapped in blood-soaked muslin. His beard was overgrown and his shirt was stiff with sweat. "You a lawman?" "No," Victor said, "just passing through." The man nodded toward the boots. "My brother didn't make it. Took a bullet 2 nights back, didn't even see who fired. He bled out come morning." Victor lowered the rifle a fraction. "You see a girl, blonde, close to your age, maybe younger." The man's eyes flicked toward the window, then back to Victor. "There was a wagon passed by 3 days ago. Had women in the back. One was hollerin', I was too far to do anything." "Which way?" "Toward the pass." Victor turned and stepped outside. Catherine stood waiting, arms folded tight. One look at his face told her enough. "Caroline?" "There's a chance," Victor said. "They're moving her west." Catherine's voice was rough. "Then we go west." They resupplied as best they could. Victor filled the canteens and Catherine found a half bag of oats in one of the broken crates. She didn't ask more about the man inside, and Victor didn't offer. By late afternoon, they were riding again. The land turned rockier as they climbed, the trees thinning into scrub oak and sage. Catherine's horse stumbled once on a loose stone, but she righted it with a steady hand. "You ever think about where you'll end up?" she asked suddenly. Victor glanced her way. "Don't reckon I have." "I used to picture a porch, whitewashed, with roses trailing up the rails." He considered that. "You still want it?" She watched the sky. "I'm not sure anymore." "The world feels different now." Victor didn't answer. The wind picked up, tugging at his collar. They camped just below the ridge where the rocks could break the wind. Catherine gathered juniper branches and Victor got the fire going. They kept it small. As they ate, Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a tiny scrap of paper. She handed it to him without a word. It was a sketch, rough and hurried. 2 girls, side by side, seated on a bench, one with her hair in braids, the other wild and loose. "She drew it," Catherine said. "Said it was to remind me we're never apart." Victor handed it back, careful not to smudge the graphite. "We'll find her." She tilted her head. "You always this sure of things?" "No," he said, "but I know what it's like to lose someone for good, and I don't want that for you." Her breath caught. She looked down, fingers tightening around the paper. "I still don't understand why you stayed," she said. Victor poked at the fire, watching a spark drift up into the dark. "Grief can make a man hollow. I didn't know how empty I'd become until I saw you." She didn't speak right away. Then quietly, "And now," he looked up, met her eyes. "Now I'm not so empty." She reached across the space between them and laid her hand over his. He turned his palm up, fingers curling around hers. Above them, the stars came out slowly, pricking the sky one by one. The fire burned low, and neither of them let go. They broke camp early. The wind had shifted in the night, carrying a sharpness that hinted at weather coming down from the high country. Victor studied the sky, low clouds gathering over the Sangre de Cristos, and tapped Catherine's shoulder gently. "We'll need to reach the pass before it closes," he said. "If it storms, the trail'll be rockslide and washout." Catherine nodded without hesitation. She'd slept lightly, her eyes opening before he'd even stirred the coals. She moved with purpose now, her limbs steadier, the pallor in her face replaced by something more determined. They rode upslope, the terrain turning steeper, the horses picking careful paths around jutting stone and loose shale. Victor kept them west by northwest. The trail had narrowed to little more than a game path, but the wagon ruts faint, worn by time and weather, were still visible in places. Someone had passed this way, and not long ago. By mid-morning, the wind kicked up and carried with it a scent of wood smoke. Victor reined in and motioned with his fingers quiet, dismount. He tied his horse behind a stand of piñon and helped Catherine down. She crouched beside him, watching as he eased forward through the brush. Beyond the rise, a small camp sat nestled in a hollow. A single wagon, canvas torn along one edge, rested at an angle. A man with a crooked shoulder stood near the wheels, checking the axle. Two others sat farther off, rifles across their laps, talking low, no sign of women. No fire. Victor turned back. Catherine's mouth was set. "We wait," he said. "I saw that wagon once," she whispered. "The wheel covers the same. I remember the tear." Victor studied the angle of the sun. "They'll move soon. We need to know where they're headed." "I'll go," she said. He shook his head. "It's too exposed." "They won't recognize me," she said. "They didn't pay me any more mind than a sack of grain when they first took me. I know how they speak, how they move. I can get close enough to listen." Victor didn't answer right away. He watched her face steady, clear-eyed, and then gave a single nod. "Stay to the rocks. Watch for the thin one with the striped blanket. He's the one watching the edges." She slipped off, silent as the wind through the brush. Victor kept his rifle trained on the camp, every muscle coiled. Minutes passed. Then he saw her again, half hidden behind a rotted stump, face turned just enough to catch their words. She returned as the sun cleared the ridge. "They've got 3 women," she said. "One's hurt. Caroline's not with them." Victor exhaled slowly. "But they knew her." One of the men said she was taken north to be traded for supplies, blankets, coffee, cartridges. Said she was too much trouble to keep. Victor's knuckles tightened on the rifle stock. "North means the Ute country." "Can we find her?" Catherine asked, her voice low. "Maybe," he said, "but we'll need help." They circled wide around the camp and rode northeast, following the ridge line. By sunset, they reached a narrow draw where a trading post once stood, now abandoned. Inside, Victor found a rusted kettle and a moldy sack of flour. He set the kettle over a fresh fire while Catherine wrapped herself in a blanket and leaned against the wall. "You ever think about what you'll do after?" she asked. Victor stirred the water. "After what?" "After we find her." He looked into the flames. "Haven't thought past it." "I have," she said. He glanced at her. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't soft. She looked like someone who'd been remade by hardship and hadn't lost herself in it. "I want a home," she said. "Not just walls. A place where I can wake up without fear in my throat." Victor nodded slowly. "That's worth wanting." She watched him for a long moment. "You ever want that?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I did, once." "What happened?" "My father drank himself bitter, said love was a fool's errand. I watched my mother fade, trying to change him." Catherine's voice didn't waver. "You're not him." Victor looked up. "No," he said, "I'm not." The fire threw shadows on the wall behind them, tall and flickering. Outside, the wind had died. The mountains stood dark against the stars. Catherine reached for his hand. He took it. There was no need for words. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of trust, of promise, of all the things they hadn't yet said but would. Tomorrow they'd ride north. Tonight they had each other. They reached the Ute borderlands by the 3rd morning. the air thinner and dry with pine dust, the trees giving way to high country meadows and crags of red rock. Victor had traded one of the horses for a pair of wool blankets and a small pouch of dried meat from a camp of trappers 2 valleys back. He hadn't said much during the exchange, only nodded and handed over the reins. Catherine watched him handle the trade with quiet purpose, like he'd done it 100 times before. They didn't speak until the sun was high over the ridgeline. Catherine walked beside her mount, her hand resting lightly on the saddle horn. The trail had narrowed to a game path again, elk tracks pressed into the clay, and scrub grew tall between the stones. "Did you ever know your mother's people?" she asked, not looking at him. Victor paused before answering. She was half Cherokee, born east near the Smokies, came west with her father after the war. She never talked much about where she was from. "I used to wonder if I had people somewhere," Catherine said, "beyond my father's kin. Someone who might have kept us if we'd never left Missouri." He looked over. "You think about going back?" She shook her head. "There's nothing waiting for me there." Victor led his horse over a fallen log. "There's a family near the Canijos River, old friends of my mother. They still trade with the Utes. If Caroline passed through these parts, someone would have heard." Catherine stopped beside a patch of wild currant, the berries shriveled on the branch. "I keep seeing her face in my sleep, but it's never the same. Sometimes she's calling for me. Sometimes she's just walking away." Victor didn't answer. He reached into his saddlebag and handed her a strip of dried apple, saved from a pack he'd bought days ago. She took it without a word, and they kept walking. By late afternoon, they found the trail. Victor remembered an old footpath marked by stacked stones, and a cedar post split at the top, worn smooth by years of wind. The land opened before them into a basin where a handful of cabins sat low against the slope, smoke curling from one chimney. A woman stepped out from a corral near the far cabin, wiping her hands on her apron. She was broad-shouldered, with gray hair braided down her back and a sharp, knowing gaze. Her name was Esther Tallman, and when she saw Victor, her face broke into something just shy of a smile. "I'll be damned," she said. "You've got your mother's quiet." Victor nodded once. "Esther, this is Catherine Sutton." Esther looked the girl over, then stepped forward and extended her hand. "You're tired and haven't eaten properly in days, that's plain enough. Come inside." Catherine hesitated, then took her hand. "Thank you." Esther led them to the cabin, where the hearth was already warm and beans simmered in a pot. 2 boys sat at a table whittling, and an older man dozed in a chair by the window. Victor removed his hat as they entered. Over dinner, Victor explained what they'd heard, what they were hoping to find. Esther listened without interrupting, only nodding now and then. When he finished, she leaned back and folded her arms. 3 days ago, a trader came through with a wagon and a girl wrapped in a blanket, sitting up front like she belonged there. Blonde but sunburnt, looked half-starved. She was quiet but alert. I asked her name. She said Caroline. Catherine gripped the edge of the table. Esther continued. They were headed west toward the old Spanish land grants near Del Norte. Said they had kin out there, but I doubt it. The trader's name was Goss. He sold women before. Never stayed long in one place. Victor stood. "We'll ride at first light. Take the mule trail behind the ridge," Esther said. "Faster than the main road and less watched." That night Catherine couldn't sleep. She sat wrapped in a quilt near the fire, staring into the embers. Victor joined her, settling beside her without speaking. "I was afraid," she said finally. "Not just of losing her, of what I'd be if I did." Victor's voice was quiet. "You'd still be you." She turned toward him. "Would I?" He took her hand. "You've changed. But not in the ways that matter." She let the silence stretch out between them, then leaned her head against his shoulder. "When this is over, I want to stay in one place." He rested his cheek against her hair. "I was hoping you'd say that." They left before dawn. The mule trail climbed high above the basin, winding through aspen and rock. By midday, they saw a wagon down in the valley, its canvas faded and a dust cloud trailing behind. Victor didn't hesitate. They pushed the horses hard, cutting across the slope, Catherine low in the saddle, her eyes locked on that wagon. They caught up by late afternoon, just as the wagon slowed to cross a narrow stream. Goss rode up front, his back straight, rifle across his lap. Victor raised his own rifle and called out once. The trader froze. Catherine dismounted and ran ahead as the wagon halted. A girl stepped down from the seat. Her hair was tangled, her dress torn at the cuff, but her eyes widened as Catherine reached her. They stood a moment breathless, then fell into each other, arms tight, forehead to forehead. Victor kept his rifle trained on Goss. "You let her go now." "I didn't take her," Goss said quickly. "She was left behind by another group. I gave her food." "I was bringing her to town." "You were selling her," Victor said. "I wasn't." Victor stepped closer. "You lucky I'm not the man I used to be." Goss raised his hands and backed away. "She's not mine. Take her." Catherine turned toward Victor, her eyes wet but clear. "We have her." "We can go." Victor nodded once. They took the wagon and left it off the trail where a rancher could find it. They led Caroline's horse tethered to Victor's and made camp near a high ledge where the stars felt close enough to touch. That night, Catherine curled beside her sister under one blanket and Victor kept watch nearby. He didn't need to, not really, but he wanted to. In the morning, Victor found Catherine watching the sunrise, arms folded, hair tangled in the wind. "She's asleep," she said. He stepped beside her, quiet as the light shifting over the rocks. "You did it." "We did." She looked up at him. "There's a piece of land not far from here. Esther mentioned it. Old homestead, half forgotten, needs fixing." Victor studied her face. "You want it?" "I want a place we build ourselves, with our hands, no ghosts." He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Then we'll build it." Catherine smiled, and it wasn't the faint, cautious thing he'd seen before. It was steady and sure. They rode south the next day, the three of them. They passed through the basin again, said goodbye to Esther, and carried on toward the land that waited. Victor worked the earth with his back and shoulders. Catherine planted the garden rose herself. Caroline mended what she could and sang while she worked, her voice quiet but stronger with each day. By the first frost, their home stood solid against the wind. A red tin roof, a porch with split log railings, and a stove that burned hot through the coldest nights. Victor sat with Catherine on that porch often, her head resting on his shoulder as the sky turned violet above them. She never asked again why he stayed. She knew, and he never left.